Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Bitcoin and Beyond. I am Melanie Carstens, your host today, and I am joined by the very wonderful Abraham Lincoln, aka Ezra, or Ezra, aka Abraham Lincoln, founder of Sovrn, which is an independent digital art gallery, and super excited to dive into what you are building. So, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
This is a first that we are doing it this way, and I think it is absolutely fantastic. What is it that you're using to create this?
It's just this thing called expression camera. I'm not an expert in making 3D avatars. There are better ways to do it, but this is the noob way, the beginner way, to be a copper bust.
Yeah, I love it. I really love it. And you're going to find out a little bit later why Ezra has chosen Abraham Lincoln, if you don't know already. So before we've kind of got a lot to unpack this evening that I'm very interested in finding out. But before we get into it all, I just want to start like I do with everybody at the beginning and kind of what your crypto story is, or what your Bitcoin story is, how you kind of maybe a little bit about your real life background, if you're willing to share, and then how you kind of came into crypto and yeah, what that journey was.
I had a friend who had he had taught himself investing in about 2007 in the library and became very well versed in that back then. And we would always talk about that stuff together, particularly Buffett. We would read Buffett's annual reports together. He's an excellent writer, Mr. Buffett.
Yeah.
And that, though, was also the reason why both of us were a bit late to crypto, because Buffett has never been, he's never liked crypto, though Berkshire does have several companies that do have like crypto involvement. But Buffett and Munger were very anti-crypto, and so it took us a while. And then in late 2020, that friend started sending me posts. I don't know, he would started forwarding me posts and articles, and I didn't really know what to make of it at first, until I think the things that made it make sense to me were reading about hash masks and the Beeple, these which were a couple of the first big articles on art sales. And, at that point, it clicked for me. And we started out with CryptoPunks, and then, I don't know, down the line a bit, then I got to know the artist Pindar Van Arman, who is an AI artist and roboticist, one of the first artists on Super Rare as well. And I got very into his work and became friends with him. And then in I think 2022, we started an art platform together. It started out because initially at that point, it was before Manifold, and you couldn't even make a Sovrn contract unless you were a coder, basically.
Yeah.
So the basic beginning was like filling that gap to be able to let artists release on a Sovrn contract and to do these releases. And we did the first few artists very low-key releases, and then we revamped the platform and gave it a push in after the first couple. And over that course, we did, I think, 13 releases on Ethereum. And Rutherford's had been making the Sense project for years, and he knew that it would make perfect sense as a
Okay, wait. You have to wait. I want to. I want to just hear your story first because I'm so excited about this. I think I want to go very deeply into what you're going to talk about now with Rutherford Chang and with the Sense project. So I just want to find out a little bit more, if you don't mind, a little bit more prior to that, just about you, and before you lead me into the Sense story. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, myself. I mean, I come from the.
What did you say? The interest is how did you get into digital art? Were you is that something you had an interest in when you were younger? Is it something you just sort of fell into when you kind of had this interest in with CryptoPunks and the early kind of NFT art that was going on?
Well, my previous life is in art, and I my background is like in theater and in writing and in visual art, and just historically, I mean, most all my friends have been artists and in art community.
Okay.
It was in living that was and they, I mean, still are in Berlin. So that's what I mean, why that is what made crypto click for me when I saw the first those first things about art. It didn't, that's what made it make sense for me as like I had a when it clicked, it was like a kind of vision of like a large distributed sort of beast that was forming in the cloud of the kind, I guess, collective consciousness. A weird thing, but it just kind of clicked in like that. And
I love it.
like,
Makes sense.
yeah, the prospect of like of cultural objects living in that I guess like emerging world or future world.
Yeah.
Yeah, hit home for me.
Yeah, it just seems like it is the obvious next iteration
Yeah.
of art, the next substrate. As we've moved through from, rock art, this to me as well, I recently wrote an article about it, or I'm busy writing it, is the closest we've actually come. Bitcoin is the closest we've come to rock art than any other substrate that we've had, since art kind of. So it's a fascinating, I think it's a very interesting conversation, and it's a very exciting one,
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you know Aaron Redwing of Inscribing Atlantis?
Yes. I don't, not personally, but we do, I think, follow each other on Twitter, I think. Yeah.
She's everywhere. But one of her favorite metaphors for ordinals is inscribing on the digital megalith. She calls Bitcoin the digital megalith.
I love that term.
Yeah, the reason they gave it the name Inscribing Atlantis was this idea that it's something that lasts even in a situation where an entire civilization is lost, or everything else can be lost, but like this, it persists on that megalith. And that, yeah, that is like rock art. Like, you carve into that megalith. I mean, to me, what stood out too is like the Bitcoin changed objecthood, like the way that objects exist in the internet age, like, which has a why, I don't know, has a relation to art objects, because before Bitcoin, there was no like full there was no ability to fully encapsulate an object and make it sovereign or data. or to have sovereign ownership of data. And it's like, we had been in the internet age and are deep in it now, or a digital age, information age, and yet had not caught up to having that means of having an equivalent to the way that you exist physically, in the way that you can own things physically. And and made a surround for those, like an encrypted surround, like in the way that a room surrounds you, or a vault surrounds you. And that that changes objects fundamentally. And
That's beautiful.
even beyond like digital art in particular, it just fundamentally, I think, changes the relationship that we have to data objects and to physical objects too, like through ownership and transaction. But
yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think a lot of people as well kind of, and it happens, I've worked in the music industry for 20 odd years.
Right.
And so I've been through the and music and art, so that's been my life's work. And I found through the music industry, from sort of cassette to from vinyl to cassette to CD to MP3, and then to streaming, every single time those things kind of the technology moved so quickly with the people pushed back against it, and then they absorbed it into their lives. But it kind of was ahead of what was happening with technology, so people couldn't really understand it. And I think when it comes to art, my view is that we have to think about why we're buying this art. And we're not buying it to use today. We're buying it to use for our future selves. Right.
I was saying, all right, right on.
Right, yeah. And I think it's there's some messages coming up for you. I think you've got to look at what does our future look like in this digital age. At the moment we're separate from it. We've got our computer screens, the Oculus, or those kind of things are the closest signs of where we're going. But I always feel like those digital rooms that we're ultimately going to live in one day are going to require art on the walls. So I'm fascinated with the future of what ordinals and NFTs mean for art. All right, so I think, I totally understand, and I totally agree with that kind of feeling of the digital art. Then you were saying with Sovrn you met Pindar, and you guys came together and created, that was around the time of CryptoPunks, right? You created this, and it lived first on Ethereum.
Yeah, Pindar and the developer Justin Hyland started in later 21 was the origin of Sovrn. And we were Sense was our first time on Bitcoin. And we came to Bitcoin because Sense makes perfect sense on Bitcoin. Yeah. And I mentioned Aaron Redwing and Inscribing Atlantis, and they helped bring so many people onto Ordinals, and they also us. They totally, like Aaron and Ordinally, Stephen Rice, the curator, like completely gave us the all the tools we needed, and Nick as well from the Gamma. Was the launch site for it, and we came to Ordinals because it's the medium that makes the most sense for that piece as the original chain, the mother chain, and as a fundamentally financial chain as well, because the piece is in relationship to like currency objects. And
so beautiful.
That
Yeah,
was
I totally, the moment I saw it, it was like how you said as well earlier, it was like a light went on and I was like, this is going to be one of the most profound collections. And on the morning show where I do the morning news show every morning and I drive
mm.
them nuts because I'm constantly talking about it every now and
Oh,
then. I'm kind
really?
of like,
I gotta come
yeah,
to this morning show. Okay.
pardon?
I've got to come to this morning show.
Yeah, you have. That was Peace hosts it with there's four of us on the panel. How did you meet? Okay, so let's introduce what you know. Ezra is a co-founder of, as we've discussed, just to reset the room, co-founder of Sovrn, which is an indie art gallery, a digital art platform, and they have released with his co-founder Pindar Van Arman. They have released collections on Ethereum. Their first collection on Bitcoin is a collection called Sense. It's a project by the late Rutherford Chang, and we're going to sort of talk about this iconic, incredible collection, and sort of Ezra is going to speak, I think, a little bit for Rutherford and how this all kind of came into being for those people who are interested
Yeah.
in Bitcoin Ordinal. So how did you meet Rutherford?
I met Rutherford through that same friend, actually, who I mentioned earlier. And
Okay.
about 20 years ago, maybe, I met him. The first thing I saw of Rutherford's was a newspaper. I don't know how to call it, like a newspaper rearrangement. Everything he did was always very based on very intricate and strict rule sets, and very exhaustively and rigorously carried out. And the first thing I saw of his that was he had done. I think it was this piece. It was called Portraits by Tone, where he had rearranged newspaper portraits by the gradient of tones, and so the resulting image was like kind of a very very abstract but still kind of a potent image. And he was showing that, and he was showing a video piece he had made where he took out just the silences of presidential speeches, I think, or it was a news piece, which is funny because that's something that's like that's an Instagram trend that I saw, like that started like last year or something. But he had done that. This is a long time ago, and I really loved those pieces. And then also I had seen my friend was doing like he was in university, was doing like labeling everything around the campus. I didn't go to the same university as him, but the other friend was also doing these labels. I loved these labels as well. Just from the beginning, I really loved Rutherford's work, and he did also amazing like mail art, like in the post
Yeah.
art. And it's funny because he is always one of my just really favorite artists, but then also like great friends, which is, you know, amazing when that happens. A lot of times, you know, some friends, like, you don't like their art, but you're a friend anyway, or or you like their art because they're your friend. But Rutherford was just always like really one of my top favorite artists through the whole time. And then when I first really met him was he came to a visit for Berlin, and I think the first day that he got there, we stayed up all night and made a deck of idea cards, we called them, which we then did a performance with them of these idea cards. That was, but they were fantastic, though. I say it like that, but and then I don't know, yeah, and
That's
then
so inspired that you just met and you just like totally clicked.
I mean,
That's magical.
Rutherford was a magical person, and also very, very kind and very funny. Very, you know, it was easy to connect with Rutherford, is what I would say. But yeah, you know, and he had finished, he had done a piece called We Buy White Albums, which I guess kind of put him on the map more majorly. That piece toured all around the world. It got written about a lot. I mean, he had some things in some good shows before that, but that really that one really blew up. And then after that, that piece was also like a just insane scale, like similar to Sense. We Buy White Albums. It's like I won't describe the whole thing but I think it ended at like 3,600 first edition copies of the Beatles' White Album, and like physically, and that it's crazy.
How many did you say? How many? 3,000.
Something like 3,600. That piece was made all of the White Album, and it's just a white record cover. It's sort of has similarities to Sense because they all started out as this single template, and then through time they changed through the marks that they acquired, and people would draw on them and write on them, similar to Sense, like also starting out as this template that changes through time. But that one anyway, he was working on that also just for a long time. He did these massive scale things, and then he started on Sense around when he was finishing We Buy White Albums, and was working on it for years. I mean, he in a way he just had very, very, very strict approaches to things. And so he would just acquire the pennies by he would go first he started out, he was in New York, and he would go and trade in at the bank to get like dollars, and would get like huge, just heaps of cents, and then sort out just the copper cents. Because the whole piece is only pre-1982 cents, which were struck in copper. I mean, that's the central, or I don't know, the beginning value discrepancy is that the copper in those pennies was worth like 3 cents, and the pennies were pennies. So he was sorting out to just get the copper pennies, and then he would go back to that bank and bring them like heaps of the junk pennies, the ones that were after 1982. And he burned out the bank. He would walk in there, and they would tell him, get out of there. They started So he burned out his New York banks, and then he would go and he would gather them just at like shops and just on the street. But for a long time, to get the 10,000 copper pennies was like, I think he went through like 100,000 pennies or something to do them. So he was working on that piece for a long time, and into 21, 22, like when I was, we were getting into NFTs and was starting that art platform. And I remember in 2021, during the big NFT bull, my friend was calling him and telling him, Rutherford, you've got to finish Sense now. But it took, it's not just sorting the pennies. He had to do like the archival photos of all 10,000 and catalog all 10,000. So it's like he didn't finish them then until like a couple of years later. And
thankfully,
and that was also Ordinals the Ordinal protocol had been written a year before Sense came out. And when I first saw the Ordinal, I mean, I came across the Ordinal protocol in the punks chat when people were like burning punks to get the Bitcoin punks, and like honestly, and it was on spreadsheets, and like I thought it was like kind of whack, like for a while. And it wasn't until about a year later that there was more interest. I don't know, that I became aware of more interesting work, and then that was also, I don't know, that then like clicked perfectly that it would be the perfect medium to do Rutherford Sense project. And Rutherford had done, I mean, he saw that too. he had been like thinking of like an art piece to do on Bitcoin. He started out making trying to do like by hand minor verifications of the minor problems to do a piece, but he doing that, as he found, doing that on paper is I don't know, it would take years or something to write that. So that wasn't it. And then it clicked then in as the final transformation for his Sense project. Like transforming them first from currency objects into art objects, and then from art objects into cryptographic objects as like I don't know, yeah, like the final facet in what I think of as the prism that he made with that piece.
Yeah, because I heard, at some point, because obviously, as you know, I've been following it for a lot since the beginning. Well, I mean, since the beginning on Ordinals, not since the beginning of him creating it. And I've read somewhere along the line that he was a prolific collector of things.
Also.
Right?
Oh, I know. I'm on YouTube too. I'm sorry. Okay, to turn that browser off. Yeah, you know the artist Shloms?
No.
He's a super interesting one of the I think most interesting people who are active. So when he wrote a great essay about collecting as a practice and about like kind of contextualizing other artists who used massive collections and the act of collecting for artwork. And Rutherford was also just an insane collector. One thing that he saved every single receipt that he ever received in his life, which was a kind of like made for a really interesting like diary of his life. He'd had them all in a binder. He would save like weird stuff too, like, and I'm gonna make it sounds crazy like he's a hoarder, but he wasn't. He was very, I mean, he lived in a little apartment, and it wasn't a hoarder apartment. But he saved weird shit too, like toothpaste tubes and like canned food from countries around the world, and like thimbles and Canadian trapper blankets from the 19th century. But
it says so much about him that he saw this beauty. I don't know. To me, it says something. I think my dad, I was just saying to Peace before you came into the, earlier on when I was talking to him, that my dad was a collector. And I think that's why I understood instantly what NFTs, the potential of what NFTs are, because my dad collected wine, he collected stamps, and he collected coins.
Right.
And there was no provenance for those, the stamps. They not worthless in real life, because obviously they have worth, but like anything, they can erode or get lost or get damaged. I don't know. So I have this sort of fascination with it, and I think that's where my interest with Sense came in, because I think my dad would have loved it too.
One of the
So I love collecting.
Hearing one of the interesting things hearing from collectors about the project is ones who connect with it because it is reminiscent of their grandparents' coin collections, or their parents or their own childhood coin collections. And that there's so many different ways that people see the project. That's a really touching one. It's also interesting that they have like trading coins or flipping NFTs or ordinals is like the collectible side of the project. And it's funny that like it functions in this kind of like degen way, in this like collector object way. There are very obvious like sets of rarities of the you know, the years and the mintages, and then also like less obvious rarities of like the patinas that people have been cataloging for the last year. Like there's been a crew of people. I see one of them here, Plutonium, has been working on cataloging every detail of the you know, the marks and the patinas and scratches. So, and you know, there's this very obvious like collectible quality to it, and I kind of love it that there's like both a very obvious degen side, a big collectible side to it, and then another side of it that is like just very heady conceptual art that has, you know, what place does that have in the crypto world? But it like has these feed in both of them, like really extreme ends of the spectrum. But yeah,
it is. And I think with anything, you know, for me, I can't bear to, you know, once I purchase, like I've not sold because I just can't. Like they just seem too precious to me. But yeah, let's talk about the collectors, because you have some of the most committed, incredible collectors. You mentioned the cataloging, but I know that there's a website that's been developed, right? And
yeah,
the traits have gone, I think, you know, it started off, obviously it's got an incredible story, which I'd like to go into as well. But, you know, the traits that it originally started with compared to where these incredible collectors have taken it.
Yeah, there has been from the beginning a very dedicated crew of people. Some of them, well, all of them, honestly, but like, but there were like, so yeah, from the beginning, there were a couple of people who proposed this idea of cataloging the trades. One of them was his name on Twitter is Become, who did a thread of categories, and the other one who took that a step into, I don't know, he took it a step further, was this guy called Archivist, who's his on Twitter, he's Punk3606. He has a great article out just today, actually. But Archivist is an archivist, and he's also like a blockchain historian, and he's done really extensive archiving of historical collections. Particularly, I think his biggest archive is of Namecoin and the non-fungible assets that were created on Namecoin, and he had experience with making these catalogs, and he I guess him and then yeah, he kind of, I guess, gave a bit of a kick to get that going. And then it started, we didn't know how insane that process would be when we started. We really did not know. And I mean, the people on the Trade Council have been working on that for literally a year now. And I mean, not, you know, obviously not like 8 hours a day every day, but like hundreds of hours of cataloging. And
yeah, you can feel the commitment. You know, even I, who's sort of just scrolling through on Twitter, when you see even the art, you know, compared to, I own some lovely art, you know, really, I mean, I'm a big fan of Far. And I've got the guy who did the Klimt. I love that, where he took the Klimt and did the generative art.
Harto.
Yes, Harto, that's it. Those are actually my top 3 favorites sort of collections that I've got. But yeah, it's amazing to see how this, like, I think, like the layers that have, you know, developed around this project, and how it seems, when you think about it, such a, you know, you've taken these cents, these pennies, and taken photographs of them, and then you put them on chain, onto the mother chain. But let's talk about that story, the much deeper meanings behind what it's come to represent. I think not only for fiat, but for Bitcoin. It tells the story of money to me in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, well, it is. So one of the things that a lot of Rutherford's work would deal with in weird ways and non-obvious ways was the arbitrariness of what is ascribed value. And that is, an essential quality of fiat currency, particularly once the currency objects for US currency went off the gold standard that was in 1971 and became fiat. They were basically conceptual objects that could be, that were defined by fundamentally, removing the physical basis by arbitrary qualities. I mean, like real qualities in the world, like armies and such, but as objects arbitrary. And that is one of the things that is really made kind of pointed by the metal material used to make a penny, for instance. That the copper in a penny is worth 3 times as much as the US Treasury says it's worth. And that also, that is basically, that's defined by context. It's, you put that object into the context of currency, it's 1 cent. You put it into the context of metal trading, it's 3 cents. You put it into the context of art, and say it was just a photograph and it's in a gallery, that's another context of like perception of that photograph. And then another object in a decentralized situation of social consensus based value, of like a trading based value. And that's sort of the core of the like the spine of the concept. And then it also when it's in the context of Bitcoin, it also has a really a kind of mirror relation to what Bitcoin itself is doing, with the very pointed scarcity of 10,000 cents out of there I think were something like 550 billion cents made, and this sort of like partitioning of these 10,000 as the arena of value in the way that of 21 million Bitcoins. And also the kind like the determination of like what is a unit of that. What is like 1 drop of what is 1 drop of Bitcoin, or what is like 1 drop of art asset, or of culture. And so with ordinals, you inscribe onto a sat, the smallest unit of Bitcoin. And with this project, you have a kind of funhouse mirror of the smallest unit of the US currency on the smallest unit of Bitcoin.
Yeah, 1 sat, 1 cent.
Yeah, and they also he sold them for 1 sat originally, and then I mean. And then another, I guess I don't know if it's a left turn, but like for the medium, like Bitcoin gets processed in blocks. you know, these verified blocks. And what he did with the 10,000 physical cents was to melt them down and make them into a block, like a literal block, like a cube.
Yeah.
And then he, you know, made that block into a 3D object that he inscribed as a block, like a full block inscription, which was insane to do, and I don't recommend it. But
that is next level. I mean, that is.
I mean, I'm glad he did it. I wouldn't tell anyone to do that. But it's kind of it's interesting because that was block 839969, and it's interesting to think that in time, like that block is forever this block, like that moment on the, you know, on the timeline of Bitcoin, on the time chain is forever this hunk of copper that are then like scattered out like pennies on the street through people's hands as they trade them. It's I forgot what the original question was.
Listen, nobody in this show, that's why it's Bitcoin and beyond. We spend a lot of time beyond. I love it. You know, it's like, to me, it's interesting. It's, you know, just sort of listening to this whole story. This block, right? So these, for those people, just I'm not sure if it was clear, but also just for kind of people who are new, because obviously this kind of, a lot of my audience is on stacks. So I just want to talk, obviously they are aware of ordinals, and probably this collection, because like I said, I mention it so often. But what happened with these pennies, obviously they were all copper because they were pre-1982. And after 1982, for those who don't know, the penny became metal, instead of copper, and it was just what they call it, plated. So all of these cents are of pennies that were prior to they were all copper, right? So these copper pennies were all photographed, and then they were inscribed, as Ezra said, onto individual sats. Then what Rutherford did was he took these pennies, the 10,000 pennies that had been inscribed to Bitcoin, and he melted them down and created a copper block of these. So they are all now together in this sort of almost sacred block. If you think about all the hands that have touched all those pennies and the journeys that they've all been on, and now they sit together, and again, like you say, inscribed on Bitcoin as well, forever on a Bitcoin block. So beautiful story there. Now, the inscription, was it the inscription or the actual block that was sold at Christie's?
The inscription.
The inscription.
Yeah, that was the digital object. The physical cube. So, you know, when the pennies themselves were inscribed as ordinals, they were destroyed, and then for the transformation of the physicality of that block, when it's inscribed, it becomes unownable. And so that was so that was the digital inscription. A collector called Dagmar got that, who is turns out an amazing person. I've gotten to know him a little bit. I mean, that's the one of one, sort of the master objects of the collection. It's the 10,001st piece it's a 10,001 piece collection technically, because the block exists there as the one of one. It's interesting, like when people write about the project, or at least like when the person who wrote about it for this book that, you know, they're like putting in the Taschen book, the next edition of on NFT's book, and the writer for it was a traditional art curator. It'll come out soon. His name is Feltenari, and he wrote mostly about the cube as the block, as the you know, sort of center point for how he talked about it. And also other writing that I've seen from the traditional art world talks about the block, because it's the most obvious object. And you know, it's like you can tell that story of like, yes, the cents were melted and they became this block. And it's interesting because like in reality, like for people who do understand like how crypto and how objects exist on Bitcoin, and who have a feel for digital objects being something, for ordinals and NFTs being something, I think it's another level of like, and it an undefinability of what the actual object is. Like, could you say that it is? You couldn't say that it's the physical penny that's destroyed, nor is it the photograph of the penny that is a representation. And in reality, the object is a gesture. It's the gesture that he created when he made these inscriptions. Like it's an act of transformation, and it's also like a consistently changing thing, because part of the core of the piece is like that the penny is worthless. Even people don't use pennies anymore. They're discontinuing them as well next year. They're not going to make any more pennies. And a penny is like a classically junk object, just a worthless object. So part of the like joke of the piece, or like really like the core of it, is making something that is like classically worthless into a valued object, a valuable object. And through a continual process, like they trade and they're revalued, people's perceptions begin to surround them and give them a substance of value. And so really that the gesture of transforming them and the gesture of transforming them in like the meaning and the value of the object is really like what they are. But but it's like it's interesting to see like people. And on the first level, from the art world, it seems like the block is the thing that makes the most sense. And then you can like layer down, or they can layer down from there, to the coming from that angle.
I think, sorry.
No, I don't remember how I got on that tangent either.
No, don't. Honestly, never worry about where we go here. It's like I was saying to somebody the other day, I asked them, like, I have a list of questions just in case. And then I generally get through like my first 2 questions, and the other 18 are just like, I don't even get there. So, and it just goes round and about. Right. So don't worry. Anyway, in real life, I talk like that. I talk around in such circles. I start here, end here, and then wiggle, wiggle, wiggle in between. Right. So it's fun. I wanted to say to you, when you were talking there, what sort of touched me was that, like, just like fiat, okay? So you look at fiat and you go, all right, it's got no value besides its intrinsic value, right? What people think it's valued. If we all woke up tomorrow and went, you know what? We're not using the dollar ever again. We're actually going to use pencils. Then nobody could stop us. That's the value of money. It doesn't really have any actual value because it's not even linked to gold anymore. But I think I have the same feeling about art. Art is so much more than a picture. And once you start to understand the layers behind what it means to people, and the idea that people give something value, and it's the same with this collection. It's the people that this means something. It struck a chord. You can release, we often say in the music industry, it's not the singers with the best voices that struck this chord that then people kind of react to, and it becomes part of the, you said collective consciousness in the beginning of this call, but it's true. It becomes part of this, there's something around us that we can't see, these other dimensions that obviously live around us.
That's like, Well, one of the core absurdities of also of the contemporary world, and I think one of the it's not, I don't mean that it's absurd in like what people find meaningful in music and in art, but it is in the detachment from being able to have a basis, or like a agreed upon basis of what something is worth or what something means. And that is particularly a quality of the digital age. And when many of the objects that we deal with the most are infinitely reproducible and hackable and transferable, and it's like it's a threshold that humanity hasn't crossed. Like we've changed the way that we relate to the things around us. We've changed the way that it's changed around us, like the way that values transacted, the things that we engage with, but we have yet to really catch up to having a system or an infrastructure that can actually deal with that. I mean, that is something that Bitcoin does for finance. It proposes to do that. To do that for the world, that means the world is using it. Mm-hmm. It's beginning to do that, and it's catching up. It's like it's decades behind, or Bitcoin's decades. No, the world is decades behind.
Yeah, and people are.
When I get bogged down by all of the craziness and just I don't know, gross aspects of crypto or of the Bitcoin world or of NFTs and ordinals, what I remember is this quality that it's just blindingly obvious that there's a necessity to have a infrastructure in place that can deal with the internet age, the digital transition. Mm-hmm. And it's just like from a big step back, it's really very apparent that it's just starting to exist. And for finance, for purely financial transaction, that it has more grounding, obviously, like crypto, for as just money. And it's still, even though there was like a big bull bubble in 21, like still really settling into people's minds what that means for cultural value and cultural objects. And so when I start to think like what is all this stuff, like, and who are these, what is going on here? There's like that's what keeps me kind of
what are we doing?
Yeah, this is what keeps me grounded, is like the massive the inevitability created by that necessity of catching up, like the literal epoch that we've been in for decades, and it's just and still don't really have I still haven't really integrated a system that can accommodate the reality of what that means for value. So it calms my mind.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful thing, and I think I love how you speak about it, and I love this idea that that we don't. I like actually not knowing. There's certain things. That's what's so beautiful being so close to the beginning of this. It's difficult to see what the future is, even though you're building it, and this is part of it. But there's this excitement as well about being alive and in this time and not knowing and thinking, what does it look like? We've basically got 2 or 3 bricks. we've got no clue what the actual structure is going to look like when we're all come together and finish. That's also what I like about the copper. It's like we are all these pennies and we are all scattered and we are working towards coming together. So I don't know, I've kind of got this, I'm a writer, so I put stories to things, and I've kind of like, that's how I feel this story is as well to me. It's these hundreds of stories coming together.
Yeah, that's an aspect of the pennies that a lot of collectors connect with deeply, is the history. A lot of people who are into ordinals deeply connect with the historical archive quality, and a number of the more dedicated collectors talk a lot about the stories of the touch and time that each of these objects have traveled through, and as a document, which is one cool way of looking at it. One of the facets of the
and especially if you believe in that things carry the stories of past, which I kind of love the idea of. I'm also a bit nostalgic about things. It's funny, when I was in my first year at school, they phased out we had what we have, the 1 rand coin, because our currency in here in South Africa is rands and cents. And we had a paper rand, 1 rand, blue paper 1 rand. And I remember they turned it into a coin, this massive coin. Okay, it was like this big. It was so weird. And so I started like frantically collecting the 1 rand notes I had in my head. And I remember sitting with my brother the one day, we had 5 rand notes as well. And I was like, one day these 1 rands are going to be worth more than these 5 rands. And I was just like, okay, whatever you know. So
that's funny. That's like very similar mentality to Rutherford.
That's why I just like everything in my whole, like, I don't know. That's why it just gels with me so much. But okay, so we haven't got much time yet. We kind of coming towards the hour, and Peace sometimes has to stop early. But you've obviously done numerous collections on Ethereum, and Sense it's an iconic collection on Bitcoin. I think it's something, it's like my husband always says, he's a musician. It's like so hard when you do your first album because you're so wild and free, and you kind of got nothing to prove. You just kind of, and then it's successful, and then you're like, oh shit, now I've got to like, do another one of those. Like, how do I want to write those songs again, kind of thing. So where are you working on something new? Do you have something in mind? Are you kind of just waiting for the right moment or the right thing? Do you have any more plans for doing anything on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I would love to do, I don't have direct plans for another Bitcoin collection. I would love to do another large scale conceptual art collection. And I'm like looking for a good one if you know of maybe working on like a killer conceptual art collection. Sovrn is not like other platforms in the sense that like we're just 2 people, and we just release projects when we come across a good one. Like, it's not a platform that has expenses or a budget, fortunately and unfortunately. So we don't have any like real need to do a bunch of releases. So yeah, we do them when we find ones that we think are great. And yeah, I would love it if it could be a home for this kind of conceptual art. And I don't know what. Yeah, we're doing a project in June. It's not on Ordinal, but I think Ordinals are quite a perfect medium for conceptual art. They, in a way, are fundamentally conceptual. I mean, it is always a case of a thing that is not the thing. It's always an ordinal or a token is basically, with the exception of contract art or not even contract art, even code-based art, like it is the object is not the thing, and that is, you know, the essence of conceptual art. So it's a perfect medium for it, and particularly pieces that deal with value, which everything does. So anyway, I would love it to be a home for conceptual art. And
Yeah.
if you or your viewers know of a really great conceptual art piece that wants to come out on Ordinal, then that, you know, send that my way.
Yeah. And do you collect Bitcoin ordinals? Have you collected any? What are your thoughts on kind of what is out there? Have you had a look at it? Are you familiar much with the artist, or just a few? I mean, you
Yeah,
obviously knew Harto when I couldn't think of the name. So
I mean, since I've gotten like quite neck deep in Ordinals, so since we've done since. There was a really interesting one I just saw today. I mentioned Archivist, who
I wanted to write that down because I want to go and check that out.
his on Twitter he's Punk3606.
Punk 3606. Yeah, I want to go check that out. Thanks.
Just today, he wrote an article about this guy, Ryan Bell, who. So Archivist had identified the oldest non-fungible crypto art ever made a while ago. He knew what it was. It's on Namecoin, and it was in 2012. But he didn't know who made it until like this week, and he just published this article about who that artist is. And I hope I'm not getting that name wrong, Ryan Bell. But it turns out it's an artist who has been active since 2012, making data art and crypto art in numerous different ways. And he did also an Ordinal mint with that in January this year, and that's one that I just got today. It's also just a beautiful piece. I mean, I love the fact that, like, this guy is literally the first person to make a piece of crypto art, but then he's also like an interesting guy, and the piece is quite beautiful. I think I don't hear you, Mel. I think you might have muted. I can't. I don't get any sound from you. Maybe. Well, I'll guess what you're saying. Maybe you're saying that sounds like a cool piece, and it is.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
That would be cool. I can just talk and you can guess what I'm saying.
Yeah. That one is.
Yeah, what is his name? So what is it? Is that a new collection that's just dropped?
That was Gamma put that out as a print in January. It's called Dark Forest. But if you find Archivist, you'll see that article about this guy. It's interesting. Like, we've been talking a lot with I've been talking a lot with this woman Daniela Jasmine, who is working with Rune Art and with Gordon Berger, and yeah, Dark Forest by Ryan Bell. Somebody just commented, and we've been talking a bunch about what is fine art on Bitcoin, and how can it be? And then that came up too, because Magic Eden just made their fine art section, so it's like a big topic. Like, well, what is that? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, to my mind, what that means is like that it is making that medium speak, that it is speaking through that medium, and giving voice to what it has to say, and giving a window into it. I think Bitcoin also makes a lot of sense as just a means of transaction for objects. Like, there's some interesting work as well that just uses it that is on Bitcoin and just uses it as a mode of transaction. There's other interesting work that uses the time stamped aspects of sats to express things that, you know, you can inscribe on a sat from any date, and that uses that kind of archiving. You know, obviously a lot of code-based art that uses the particularities of the protocol to make images. But I think, I mean, there's a certain feeling of inevitability about ordinals, about art, about Bitcoin art, that I think a lot of people are sort of circling around and waiting for it to start to flow. And it has had a moment that kind of got like exhausted and vacuumed out by a few people in the ordinal world. But like, I don't really worry about it like in the longer term, because it's like, for like just the prospect of crypto and like of art and culture existing on that medium, there's few things that make more sense, and you know, it's like a matter of time, I think, in general. But
I mean, I can't tell you. It's like you're speaking my language. I absolutely 100% am baffled when I speak to people. I'm so passionate about it, you know. So I speak to people, and I can just see them kind of like, oh, you know. There's a in South Africa, there's an art, just a collection of kind of some of the most famous, you know, canvas arts, oils, and they've been left, not been taken care of, and so they are busy at the moment. They're trying to restore these collections. There's investment from, you know, America. Because it's a very important art collection. And so I was sitting with the woman who is heading up this restoration project, and I said to her, so she says, you know, they're archiving these paintings and whatever. And I said to her, well, where are you putting this? You know, because now you've just seen that they can actually be destroyed. So, and I started talking to her about putting on a Bitcoin, and she was just blown away that you could do that. You could take this work and you could, you know, if something does happen to it, at least you've got some sort of immutable record. Now, what are your thoughts on putting because obviously with Sense, that was a physical item. You know, a lot of digital art is digital art. It's created digitally and it is traded digitally. But what are your thoughts? Obviously, with Sense, that is a real life product object that has now been inscribed. But you know, the idea as well, and right in the early stages where the painting was kind of created and turned into an NFT and then destroyed. What are your thoughts on traditional art, like oil on canvas, and putting that onto Bitcoin? Do you think these two pieces coexist? Do you think one should be destroyed? Do you think it depends?
Well, I mean,
fine artists, you know, whose medium is sculpture or oil or, you know, pencil, whatever they do.
Yeah, the main case for that usage of it is the case of provenance and immutable and verifiable provenance, which is a huge element of the fine art world. I mean, it's a big chunk of what museums do and gallerists do, and that becomes especially relevant down the line, like in the future, when after the people who remember it are gone, or the people who know the details, or who remember what file that's in, or where it's stored, and also in cases of like the like what's the word, like the realness of the object, like if it's a fake or not, the trueness of it, that aspect of provenance, and you know, people in the I mean, like obviously, like museums and galleries have their own systems of provenance, and a lot of them, I don't know, like a lot of them currently are like, oh, we don't need that, we have our own thing. But I think in, you know, in the future that it just becomes more and more pressing to have uh, like an immutable and also like a trustless source of that you can know what's real. And I guess that becomes also more pressing in a context where things become easier to fake, which is the, you know, the case with digital things, obviously. But I guess, you know, that's probably, you know, that's moving into the physical realm quickly, like we're with AI and robotics, whatever. You know, and just like basically the whole apps, the whole post-truth era, whatever. it becomes important. So like that that's, you know, regardless of the medium, that's just for any cultural object, anything. Uh, you know, it is very like functional for that. And I guess it's just a matter also of where people decide to be, like what they decide makes sense. Like if the primary means of transaction and you know, ledger keeping is on blockchain, then it makes sense to operate on the you know, the most decentralized and most trustless one. But I could, yeah, like there have been a couple of really interesting works that just are basically, you know, that are another medium and are just using inscription for that. And it's harder to connect at the moment with like the very, very specific crowd of ordinal people. But I think that has a future that makes sense, personally. It's my non-expert opinion.
Yeah, I mean, mine would be pieces. We've got to we've been running a little bit over time, but you know, that is, and I know collectors as well. A lot of the collectors just sort of buying art, creating it, and going into storage. And I know people who say, you know, they don't have enough wall space for the art they own, and you can't, you know, art has to be hung in a special way. You know, the sizes obviously matter on the walls, so you can't just chop and change it, as you know, very easily, right? So
Yeah.
one of the appeals to me about when it comes to besides provenance for work, let's just say oil on canvas, you're able to store the original, you know, that is like in the vault. And I think digital canvas is going to evolve to a point where it's not going to look like a TV screen, you know, with art hanging up, you know.
Yeah, I mean, well, the I think you mean it, but the other side of that is that like one aspect of an art object is the physical experience of it, like being in the presence of it. And the other aspect of like of art and cultural objects is that these, you know, they become part of the identity of a person. They become part of the statement in the world that a person makes of who they are. And that you know, that's regardless of whether there's an object on your wall or in your you know, on your pedestal. It's like the things that you own, and that you integrate them into yourself, into the like mass that you put out into the world, or like the, you know, the perception of yourself that you create for others. And that, I mean, is a weird way of putting it, maybe, but like it is something that exists already, obviously, in, like you mentioned, like the way that like the art objects are often exist in vaults. But I guess like a person is a mass of values. And one of the most interesting things I've heard said about crypto art was from this guy 113, this artist, who said he used the term Web3, which he hates and I hate, but he said one of the main things that Web3 taught us is that tokens, NFTs, at that time he was talking about NFTs. NFTs are speech with stakes. You have a stake behind it. You have value behind it, and you can make like something that's a parallel to a body in the world. So it's just another way that it's a way that we already do relate to objects and to culture that I don't know how it's, I guess, not so widely conscious, but it's one of the reasons why blockchains, why like tokenized work, and why inscriptions make sense in a fundamental way.
Yeah,
I would say.
Amazing, beautiful. I love that note to end on as well, because it does. It makes sense. Yeah. It's just, if you want to take anything away from this, it makes sense in all ways. That's, to me, the best line ever to sort of
ending with making sense.
Yeah. It all makes sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you. I've really loved talking to you, and you were always welcome, whether you want to come as Abraham Lincoln or anybody else. Yeah, and if any of the artists want to talk to the audience as well, always welcome. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about Sense and Ordinal's art. And remember, we are here every Thursday, 12 p.m. ET for Bitcoin and Beyond. And I just want to shout out Peace Love in the background, who's been helping us out, and Deorganized Media, and obviously Bitcoin Live to be brought to you in partnership with them. So yeah, see you next week, Thursday. Thank you very much, and bye.